Hey everyone, it's Andrew Lapomardo here, and today we are going to talk about the top 30 brilliant werewolf movies that every horror fan must watch. Well, let's get into it. One could argue that the popularity of werewolf movies has always been on par with the likes of zombie flicks or vampire films. However, there have been some mind-blowing werewolf movies worth howling for. The genre has seen some rather unique takes on werewolves from time to time. Some tried to make things creepy, others dwelled on the unexplained, and the remaining simply made the werewolves monstrous. Every time the genre seems to calm down, there was a new werewolf flick to ignite the interest of the fans once again. We have been blessed with some unforgettable werewolf classics over the years, and in this video, we will take you through some of the finest ever made. It is time to smelt the silver into bullets and barricade the doors, as we bring you 30 of these terrifying werewolf movies. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Wolfman, 2010. Lawrence had a troubled childhood ever since his mother died. He was sent away from his home, and after several years, he was lured back to the family estate. His brother Ben is missing, and his grieving fiancée Gwen tracks him down to help her out. He comes back to find that his brother has been brutally murdered, and the killer seems to be a bloodthirsty creature heard of in stories. Lawrence is reunited with his estranged father one more time. But soon, he finds out that a horrifying destiny awaits him. The villagers have been dying mysteriously gruesome deaths, and even a detective from Scotland Yard comes to investigate. When Lawrence himself transforms into a werewolf on every full moon, he must kill or be killed. Can his brother's fiancée find a way to heal him of this curse? And can they get to the notorious killer in time? The movie is a remake of the 1941 horror classic that went by the same title. Both these movies are really impressive efforts that shine mostly to their engaging atmosphere. There were some very suspenseful moments, and the well-written script was simply delightful. The actors are remarkable, and Anthony Hopkins, in particular, simply steals the show, like we expected any less. Others, like Emily Blunt and Benicio del Toro, are also up to the mark and deliver believable performances. Again, shocking? The narrative was emotional at certain moments, and also gory and scary when the script demanded so. We get to see some intense kills, and the jump scares got us a couple of times. There were some stunning werewolf transformations, and the direction of Joe Johnston was good enough for most of the film. We must spare a word for the sets and costumes. These are the things that make this movie an underrated horror classic. If you seek a tense adrenaline rush from a werewolf flick, this might be the one to dive into. The Howling, 1981. Karen is a newswoman who helps the police track down and kill a serial killer named Eddie Quist. However, her encounter with the killer before the police arrived left her in a state of trauma and shock. To deal with her emotionally disturbed state, Dr. George Wagner suggests she spend some time at the colony, a secluded retreat. She heads there for a vacation with her husband Bill, but soon, things become rather strange for the couple. The residents seem very weird, and a bit too eager to mix with them. Some of the residents display strange, unexplained behaviors as well. All hell breaks loose when she realizes that Eddie is a werewolf, and this retreat houses several others who are simply trying to keep a low profile. When their cover is blown, Karen must fight for her life. Joe Dante, the director of this movie, knows a thing or two about terrifying his audience. He offered his unique take on werewolf movies, and it was appreciated by fans and critics alike. The narrative is packed with edge-of-your-seat suspense and some genuine thrills. The werewolves look pretty good, and after a bit of a slow start, the narrative gets quite exciting. There are some great visuals, and the use of light and fog heightens the spookiness of the movie. As for the acting, The likes of Dee Wallace, Patrick McNee, Belinda Balaski, and Christopher Stone pull off some strong performances. The storytelling was laced with some satirical humor, which added to the fun. The efforts might not have aged the best, but they still stand as a decent effort considering the time. The makeup, however, was absolutely spot on, and it helped nullify the minor flaws. This movie won the Saturn Award, and the classic werewolf flick certainly deserved it. It brought back the popularity of werewolf flicks in the 80s, and will go down as one of the finest in the genre. Dog Soldiers, 2002. As part of a routine military exercise, a British squad is sent to the Highlands of Scotland on a training mission. They are supposed to train with the Special Operations Squad, but when they arrive, they find a terribly wounded captain and the scattered remains of his team that has been slaughtered. They run into a zoologist named Megan, and she seems to know what is hunting them. The region is brimming with hungry werewolves, and they have to survive the night in the middle of nowhere. The training mission turns into a deadly battle to see who can make it through the full moon night. This movie might not be perfect, but it does possess the ideal storytelling technique. The concept of a group of soldiers, well armed and equipped, facing the paranormal threat of werewolves is quite unique. It is for the honesty of the narrative that the film works. The creatures' special effects are decent enough, and they are in fact better than many big-budget werewolf flicks. There are a few nail-biting moments and a scary sequence orchestrated carefully by the director Neil Marshall. The British movie has invested well in its werewolf designs. They look absolutely badass. The locations are breathtakingly beautiful, and the well-filmed scenes exploit this to the fullest. Starring the likes of Liam Cunningham, Kevin McKidd, and Sean Pertwee, the film sets the bar high in terms of acting. What we loved about the narrative is that despite all the scary moments and gore, there were some humorous bits as well. It might seem like a straightforward storyline, but there are a few surprises here and there. It holds loads of bloody fun that will captivate the audience. And we strongly recommend this movie to anyone who can keep their judgmental self away from the cheesy bits. An American Werewolf in London, 1981. 1981 was a great year for werewolf movie fans, and this was possibly the best out of the lot that was released that year. The story takes you on a journey with two American college students named Jack and David, who embark on a walking holiday across northern England. They are attacked by a werewolf. While Jack is ripped apart, David survives the mauling. While recovering, he is troubled by some haunting nightmares, and at the same time, he develops a bond with a nurse named Alex. After being discharged from the hospital, he stays at her apartment, but he is visited by his dead friend. Jack warns him that if he doesn't kill himself, he will transform into a werewolf on the next full moon. David thinks that he is going crazy and doesn't pay heed to the warnings. Only when the full moon finally arrives, he is transformed from a man to a beast that goes on a murderous rampage across London. The movie is what you collectively refer to as a great film. It has a compact plot, a few intriguing characters, humor, and above all, some terrifying bits to scare the living hell out of you. Horror and humor have seldomly been mixed better, and it is probably because the director and writer, John Landis, has directed some entertaining comedies before. The epic werewolf transformation scene will be etched into your memory for a long time. It won the Academy Award for the Best Makeup category, and it was the first film to win this. If the practical effects by Rick Baker do not win you over, the beautiful storytelling will. The horror comes in a brutal form. We also loved the unforgettable werewolf howl. That sounds like a mixture of an actual call of a beast and a man's scream. David Naughton, Jenny Agutter, and the others came up with an impressive performance to add to the brilliance of the movie. The American Werewolf in London rightly deserves to be hailed as one of the best werewolf flicks ever made. And if you haven't watched it already, it is high time you checked it out. Where 2013. While camping in the woods, the Porter family gets slaughtered. Claire Porter is the only survivor, and she claims that a really strong man attacked them and devoured her husband and son. The police arrest Talon, who lives in the woods with his mother. The police inspector, Klaus Pister, is convinced that he is the man behind the gruesome murder, but Talon has been assigned a defense attorney, Kate Moore. She comes in with an investigator and an animal expert to examine Talon, and soon they discover many loopholes in the story. They learn from Talon's mother that he has a strange, rare disease, and they find out that her husband also died under mysterious circumstances. Kate successfully sends Talon to a hospital for examination, where she learns the true extent of Talon's so-called disease. There is a lot more to what meets the eye after all. One of the first things that came to mind while watching this movie is, why isn't it more popular? Where makes werewolves scary once again? And the story is enriched by the mysterious narrative. The audience is always kept in the dark, and that helps in keeping them interested. It often gets a bit too brutal, and there are some very graphic moments in the film, especially the werewolf attack. The special effects are magnificent, and it made the movie a lot more realistic and animalistic. The casting was simply perfect, and the center character of Talon, played by Brian Scott O'Connor, was the best of the lot. It is tough to implement the found footage style of the filming, but this movie does it pretty well. It starts off as an investigative thriller, but soon transforms into a horrifying werewolf story. The fast-paced narrative makes it a great experience, and this is as good as a low-budget werewolf flick gets. The Wolf of Snow Hollow, 2020. John Marshall is a troubled police officer, dealing with an alcohol addiction and anger management issues. He also has problems with his ex-wife, who is trying to separate his daughter from him because of his issues. A violent murder takes place in their quiet town, the likes of which haven't ever been seen before. Slowly, people start to talk about a possible werewolf being the murderer, and more deaths follow. John, however, is determined that a man is behind the killings, and he reacts furiously whenever someone mentions werewolves as the culprit. Will he be proven wrong and manage to deal with the threat despite his personal condition? What? The film is unexpectedly good, and a rather unusual take on a werewolf story. One of the best things about the story is how organically it unfolds. You might feel like you know where the plot is headed, but ultimately, it comes together all too well without any gimmicks. However, it should be noted that this movie is more of a character study than a horror flick. It might be labeled by many as a horror comedy for some funny moments, but in reality, it is more about the drama surrounding the main character. He is played by the director and writer, Jim Cummings, who successfully invokes sympathy for the character that you would otherwise hate. It is always interesting to watch an alcoholic lawman struggling with personal issues, racing against time to nab the vicious killer who strikes on full moon nights. There is enough blood and gore to please action fans, and Robert Foster's final film is surely a memorable one. We loved the beautiful setting of a frozen small town, which helped the story sink in better. It is not the most loved movie, because the joy of subtle stories is less appreciated these days. We would suggest you to not overanalyze the story or the dialogue, and simply watch this movie for all the fun. Underworld, 2003. For hundreds of years, vampires and werewolves have been sworn enemies. At present, one of the lethally alluring vampire assassins, the young vampire death dealer Celine, gets rid of the remaining werewolves. The leader of the werewolves is dead, and the end of their clan seems near. However, Celine soon uncovers a long-standing conspiracy. The Lycans target a human named Michael, who can bond with both vampire blood and werewolf blood. Celine shadows him, trying to uncover the Lycan plot to end her entire race, and falls in love with Michael in the process. But he gets infected during an intense struggle with the Lycan overlord. As both sides face new threats and new secrets are revealed, they must decide on the way to end the conflict. This is no ordinary vampire movie. It tells the story of a secret war between vampires and werewolves, and it is quite a commendable effort. The gripping script brings the plot together, and the dark and gothic look of the film goes well with the storyline. The narrative does not shy away from blood and graphic violence, but there is a lot more to it beyond all the action. We loved the idea of introducing a bitter rivalry between these ancient supernatural species, and the plot uses science to bring the vampire and werewolf legends into the modern age. Stuff like the werewolves being allergic to silver is some of the logical inferences of their vulnerabilities. Yes, the movie finds itself a bit lacking in terms of the action sequences and special effects, but the cast, especially Scott Speedman and Kate Beckinsale, take your mind off any flaws that you may have noticed. Climax is fabulous, and delivers the twist that no one saw coming. Add to that the stunning set designs and makeup, and you have an uncomfortably realistic vampire werewolf flick in your hands. If you want a fresh take on the same old storyline, you've got to check out this movie. Ginger Snaps, 2000. Bridget and Ginger are two morbid, death-obsessed sisters, and these teenagers are somewhat outcast in their neighborhood. The night that Ginger has her first period, she is attacked by a mysterious creature. It is the same creature that was responsible for the slaughter of several local dogs, and it injures Ginger. Ever since the attack, Ginger has started to change drastically. Her appetite increases considerably, and she also becomes a lot more aggressive. It turns out that she was bitten by a deadly werewolf, and some tragic consequences would follow. As Ginger turns deadlier, dogs are not the only things dying in the locality. Her sister tries to reach out to a new friend in order to find a cure for Ginger. Will sisterly love prevail, or is Ginger beyond recovery? You must have seen films that equate the bloodlust of vampires and werewolves with sexual desire. This movie has a different take on the concept, and links lycanthropy with puberty. The narrative recreates the world of two gothic sisters and their helpless mother, who desperately wants them to be normal and happy. It portrays becoming a werewolf as a mere extension of the pain of being a troubled teenager. However, this doesn't make the film any less scary, and it manages to startle you without any special effects till the very end. The clever script makes for a strong teen horror flick, and it is quite gory and graphic at times. The cast put up a great show, and even though the narrative lacks the cliches of the other werewolf flicks, it is quite intriguing. It is not only one of the darkest movies on this subject, but also one of the most realistic. We also love the open-ended nature of the climax. The movie wasn't very popular when it was released, largely due to the poor marketing strategy. The title and the package with the posters made it look like some mindless teen horror flick, when the content was far more promising. The low-budget Canadian movie is proof that a high-class horror film doesn't always require extravagant effects or location. Van Helsing, 2004. Gabriel Van Helsing is a legendary vampire hunter who has a curse past himself. The Vatican sends him to Transylvania to put an end to the menace of Count Dracula. The powerful royal family residing there has almost been annihilated by Dracula's wrath, who rules with his power of fear. Anna Valerius is one of the last remaining members of the royal family. She is a fearless warrior, determined to avenge the death of her ancestors. They join forces to fight the powerful Count Dracula, an enemy who never dies. Van Helsing uncovers a secret that leaves him shaken, and his own mysterious past comes to the fore. Can they still overthrow the horrific evil scheme of world domination that Dracula has in mind? For the people who complain that this movie lacks a realistic touch, well, this is a film about vampires, werewolves, and monsters, for goodness sake. Yes, it is not Oscar material, and it was only intended to be harmless, good, campy fun. As far as character remakes are concerned, Van Helsing makes for a macho action hero, with a mix of James Bond, Indiana Jones, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The movie makes good use of some exotic locations, and CGI has been used extensively throughout the narrative. There are some unforgettable, physics-defying stunts and transformations in the plot where the CGI comes in handy. The monsters are a perfect homage to Hammer horror in Boris Karloff film, and Dracula along with his wives are portrayed quite uniquely. The fast-paced narrative changes quickly, and there are intense action scenes packed throughout the film. It starts off with a black and white sequence, and color is introduced soon after, adding a nice rustic touch to the narrative. Had it not been for the two gifted performers in Hugh Jackman and Kate Beckinsale, the movie wouldn't have been the same. There is an occasional leap of reason, and loopholes in the plot are plentiful. Sidestep the flaws, and you will be entertained by a fun, enjoyable fantasy adventure with one of the iconic heroes of vampire lore. HOWL, 2015. Joe is a train guard who is forced to do a late-night shift on an overnight passenger train. The train departs from London at midnight, and Joe's only consolation is that he gets to spend some time with his unrequited love, the tea trolley girl, Ellen. It is a full moon night, and a heavy thunderstorm rages on as the train speeds through the landscape. In a forested area, the train collides with a deer and gets derailed. The driver gets down, checking out the situation, when a werewolf attacks and kills him. Joe and the rest of the passengers are soon aware of the presence of this bloodthirsty werewolf, and a cat-and-mouse game for survival begins. How many of these passengers will survive the onslaught? The indie British horror flick might not be an unforgettable classic, but it does have some qualities to make it very enjoyable. HOWL delivers a straightforward werewolf story. It is about a werewolf siege on a train filled with unarmed passengers and the train guard, all of whom are relatable as regular protagonists. The special effects are a mixture of practical effects and CGI, but the end result turns out to be quite impressive. The train guard is played by Sean Pertwee, the guy from the werewolf classic Dog Soldiers, and he's a perfect fit in this role. The dark, foggy English countryside adds to the mystery of the narrative, but there are some moments that are a bit too far-fetched. For instance, we simply can't buy that an engineering student knows how to fix and operate a train. The script is not the strongest in this movie, but the exciting turn of events barely allows you enough time to dwell on such flaws. The designs of the werewolves were something interesting because they did not look like the usual wolf-like furry beast. Instead, the werewolves resemble mutated humanoids, and such details make this a refreshing new age werewolf movie. Our verdict? The movie could have been a lot better, but it is still an effort worth your time. Werewolf Woman, 1976. Daniela had a troubled childhood, where she was raped and traumatized. She was left emotionally troubled following her trauma, and failed to have a normal romantic relationship. Later, she finds out that one of her female ancestors was killed for purportedly being a werewolf. She resembles this woman and starts having strange nightmares, where she transforms into a werewolf and is being chased by the villagers. She even kills her sister's lover in her disoriented state. Strangely enough, she falls in love with a kind, handsome stuntman named Luca. Just as they start their life as a happy couple, she is raped by two of his friends, who also murder Luca. This incident shatters the remaining bits of Daniela's sanity, and she gets her revenge by killing them, now believing strongly that she is a werewolf. Eventually, she is captured and institutionalized, where she dies. The disturbing Italian psychological horror is one that takes a step away from the conventional werewolf stories we usually come across. The narrative is graphically violent and disturbingly explicit at times. It is certainly not for the faint of heart, because there are scenes where throats are ripped out, even though the violence is not of supernatural nature. Daniela and her struggle with her trauma and psychological disorder are at the forefront of this story. The movie offers a depressing and disturbing look at the darker side of humanity. One of the things that we love about the narrative is that it allows the viewer the freedom to decide whether Daniela is a psychopath or truly possessed by the spirit of her werewolf ancestor. As for us, we went with the former based on the turn of events. It is an Italian sleaze fest at its finest, because most of the female cast disrobes quite frequently. Besides, the plethora of gory murders keeps things interesting for those with a taste for violence. There is not much in terms of suspense, But it is the intelligent filmmaking that captivates you for the entire length of the movie. Dark Moon Rising, 2009. The story is premised in a small town in the countryside, and Amy is a young teenager overprotected by her father. A newcomer mechanic named John arrives in town, and they fall in love. However, John has also brought with him a curse in his family. He transforms into a werewolf on every full moon night. Meanwhile, the locality is plagued by the mysterious slaughter of people and farm animals. These seem to be the works of a wolf, and an outsider sheriff named Charles Thibodeau comes up with some shocking facts about the murders. It turns out that Bender, a man who shares the same curse as John, has an insatiable bloodlust. He is the one behind all the murders, and now wants a final showdown with his old enemy in this city. We have to admit that the story is moderately compelling, but it is still more of a love story than anything else. It is also the tale of two families coming together and a psychopathic werewolf father trying to track down his son for a reunion. The big bad werewolf is an absolute monster, but he is also quite a likable villain, even though he leaves a trail of gore wherever he goes. The film is somewhat predictable after some time, which can be an issue for those seeking some thrilling moments. Yes, there are some action scenes that stand out, but nothing jaw-dropping enough to startle you. Things could have been a lot better for this movie without the horrible special effects. This makes the transformations laughable, and the costumes do not provide even a minimal sense of realism. Another major flaw in this movie is the duration. It stretches on unnecessarily, despite such a simple story. Overall, this can be your Saturday night entertainment alongside a couple of beers, as long as you don't set the expectations too high. Wolfcop, 2014. Lou Garrow is an alcoholic cop, thought of as a lazy fellow who is good for nothing. It all changes after he is assigned a tricky case involving a cultist. When he arrives to investigate, he is knocked out all of a sudden. He then wakes up in his bed the next morning without remembering how he got there. Nevertheless, some changes have clearly been made inside of him. He heals quickly, has newfound energy, and his senses have also drastically sharpened. It turns out that he has been transformed into a werewolf. We now have a heroic werewolf cop in the middle of a sinister plan by some of the occultists, who also happened to be shapeshifters. He was transformed as part of a larger plan, but Lou was not going to bow down to the wishes of those involved. This movie is as straightforward as it gets. It is the story of a cop who turns into a werewolf, and that is just about it. It is a low-budget effort, and the acting is nothing to write about. The script purposely adds a hilarious touch to make things easier for the making of the movie. That being said, the special effects are not the worst, and at times, they turn out to be quite a surprise. The narrative is full of grindhouse-style violence, and this Canadian horror comedy will remind you of Hobo with a Shotgun. The film is hilarious and gory, all at the same time, and the narrative is downright clever. The puns are on point, and B-movie lovers will find a hidden gem in this one. The ending of the movie goes in an unexpected direction, and is quite the shock for the viewer. In short, Wolfcop is an overwhelming B-movie, and it has got to be one of the best B-movies of modern times. Bad Moon, 1996. Ted was researching with his girlfriend and a group of natives in the forest of Nepal. Suddenly, they are attacked by a beastly figure, and Ted is the sole survivor in this onslaught. He is wounded, and his sister Janet learns about the tragedy. She invites him to move his trailer near their property so that he won't be all alone in this. However, Ted starts showing some obvious signs of a werewolf transformation. He tries his best to contain the curse by using the love of his family, but it seems to be a losing battle. Janet soon finds out that her brother might be a werewolf, and that her family is in serious danger. The family dog, Thor, who endangers himself to protect all that he holds dear, is the only hope for the survival of the family. Is there an end to the werewolf curse?
Nice doggy.
Bad Moon has got to be one of the most underrated werewolf films, because it has largely escaped the attention of horror movie enthusiasts. It's not one of the modern-day, big-budget extravaganzas with tons of CGI effects. In fact, the film retains the old-school practical effects that the purists love. The story is packed with entertainment, and they also got rid of the idea that werewolves transform only on full moon night. Ted transforms every single night. And we have to say that the werewolf in this movie looks great. The performance by the entire cast was decent enough, but the German Shepherd, Thor, steals the show. Thor is hands down the smartest one in the film, and it is admirable how the makers got the dog to perform some of the stunts in front of the camera. The level of gore is pretty average, but the action scenes never lack spice. The climactic moments offer quite an adrenaline rush, making this a good werewolf movie that you shouldn't miss out on. The Curse of the Werewolf, 1961. The story is premised in 18th century Spain. A beggar who goes to beg at a castle owned by a cruel marquess is imprisoned in the dungeon. For decades, he survives only because the mute daughter of the jailer fed him all these years. Later, even she is imprisoned in the same dungeon, and the beggar rapes her. When she is finally released, she kills the marquess and flees to the forest. Don Alfredo finds her living like an animal, and she is also pregnant with a son. After her death, Don Alfredo brings up her son, named Leon, who is carrying an ancient curse. He is a werewolf who transforms into one on full moon nights and terrifies the town. He also works in a wine cellar by the day and is in love with the owner's daughter. Is there an end to his condition, or is he destined to end that way? Hammer Studios did not make too many werewolf movies. In fact, this is the only one they ever created, and it is baffling how they came up with something so neat. The Curse of the Werewolf is amusing and enjoyable, partly because it is such an unusual werewolf movie. It goes ahead with the concept that when someone is conceived under extremely unpleasant circumstances, he or she becomes lycanthropic. The narrative begins with a long prologue, and the tragic tale behind the curse is revealed. It quickly boils down to an interesting story that might lack logic, but never lacks entertainment. The makers also did a great job by not letting the audience catch a glimpse of the creature properly until the very end. The excellent acting and the ambient sequences make the movie quite appealing. We loved the portrayal of the werewolf in this film, someone who is more of a tragic hero who has no control over what he does. Considering that this movie was made back in the 60s, the makeup and sets are top-notch as well. It is one of the old classics for you to try out in this maze of new age werewolf flicks. Wolf, 1994. Will Randall is an aging publisher who is bogged down at work by a younger co-worker who takes over his position. He has also been separated from his wife, and to make matters worse, a wolf bites him. However, this turns out to be a turning point in his career. After being bitten, Will finds himself re-energized and is more competitive than ever. He also has heightened senses and an unexplained thirst for blood. To complicate things further, his boss's daughter, Laura, falls for him. She has no clue that the man she loves is on the verge of turning into a deadly werewolf. Meanwhile, Will's rival is also smitten by Laura, and it brings about a deadly confrontation between the two. The police also get involved because they suspect Will of killing his wife. To know how this drama ends, you have to watch this werewolf classic, featuring the maestro, Jack Nicholson. Imagine a man who transforms into a wolf and kills people at night, and the movie is still not a proper horror flick. This is precisely the charm Wolf has. It is a werewolf story with some style and class, and you couldn't pick anyone better to play the protagonist than Jack Nicholson. He simply aces the role that he is assigned, like he does all the time, and this unapologetic, serious, modern monster drama is intelligent filmmaking at its best. It is not just about a man who turns into a werewolf at night. Instead, the movie focuses on how he slowly acquires the traits and becomes more animalistic. Besides the tight script, the film is perfectly paced between the fights and character development. Instead of using any CGI monstrosity, you get to see the good old man styled in a suit. The result promises some brilliant visuals, and it only gets better with time. With such a beautiful blend of realism, satire, and horror, we wouldn't want you to miss out on this one. Cursed, 2005. Ever since their parents died, Ellie has been taking care of her brother Jimmy. One night, after she picked him up from a party, they meet with a car accident. They try to rescue a woman in the other car, but suddenly, a beastly creature attacks them. The woman is killed and both Ellie and Jimmy are injured. After the attack, they both start experiencing certain deviations in themselves, such as becoming more socially assertive and aggressive. They soon realize that the creature that attacked them was actually a werewolf, and they too would turn into one unless they managed to kill it. Can the siblings manage to save themselves from the curse, or will they turn into full-fledged werewolves by the next full moon? For Wes Craven fans, this movie might have come across as a disappointment. However, the director hardly got his way in terms of the release of this film. In fact, he abandoned the film when the chairman of Dimension Films demanded to have a PG-13 cut instead of the R-rated version envisioned by Wes Craven. Someone else finalized the editing, and clearly, the impact shows in the end result. However, it is still a decent film if you consider that some major chunks of the movie are actually missing. It is a predictable collection of cliches, but sometimes cliches work just fine. Christina Ricci was brilliant in the movie, and the plot does take a few good turns. The werewolf looked pretty cool, except for the one transformation scene that could have been done with a bit more flair. The humor in the narrative is quite pleasant, and there are a few hilarious moments alongside a few corny ones. As long as you don't go in expecting to be scared, this can be an enjoyable watch. Silver Bullet, 1985. Tarker's Mills was a quiet and peaceful small town until some mysterious murders started taking place. The close-knit community is disturbed, and they believe that there is a maniacal killer on the loose. They intend to hunt down this psycho killer and make plans accordingly. However, a handicapped young boy named Marty believes that the murders were not acts of any man at all. He thinks that a werewolf is behind these attacks, and along with his sister Jane, he starts to look all over the town for signs of this werewolf man. In one of Marty's encounters with the beast, he shoots a rocket into its left eye, and now they are looking for a man with an injured eye. It turns out that the local reverend is the werewolf, and the siblings must convince the elders about his real nature. Will they be able to fend off his deadly attack on the next full moon night? This is an extremely well-directed film, and it totally relies on the tension and atmosphere created. The story is neatly packed with few loose ends, and the acting performances from the cast, comprising of Corey Haim, Gary Busey, and Megan Follows, are quite likable. The movie does have its horrifying moments, such as the gruesome murders. That being said, the attack scenes are also crafted to use the viewer's imagination as well. The identity of the werewolf also puzzles the viewer for some time in the beginning. It is an adaptation of one of Stephen King's novellas titled Circle of the Werewolf, and you would expect nothing less from this horror maestro. The characters are adorable, and we loved the brother-sister dynamic between Marty and Jane. You have a handicapped protagonist, but his wheelchair doesn't stop him from seeking out a dangerous werewolf. This is not going to be registered as an all-time werewolf classic, but it would certainly provide you with all the entertainment you need for a movie night. Skinwalkers, 2007. According to Navajo legend, a 13-year-old boy will end the curse of the Skinwalkers or werewolves. This half-breed boy is Timothy, who is completely aware of his true origin. He has no clue that the rest of his family are also werewolves, who have guarded him since his birth. He controls the destiny of the family, but is also in great danger because there are some werewolves who want to finish him off to preserve their way of life. Just a couple of days before his 13th birthday, the evil pack of werewolves goes after the young boy. Caught between the two warring factions of werewolves, Timothy has to survive if their family fortunes are to change. Can his family continue to protect them till he brings about an end to their curse? It is not an easy task to perfect a werewolf movie, because they explore an area of mythology that has multiple facets. Thus, it is not possible to please everyone, and clearly, this film has failed to do so, giving it poor success. However, we quite like this tacky werewolf flick simply because of its entertainment value. The storyline is simple enough. One group of werewolves is trying to protect the boy, while the other group is trying to kill him. This promises a lot of action between the warring factions. The intense fighting and chase sequences make things exciting. There are plenty of good-looking ladies as well to spice things up a bit. The cinematography is quite remarkable, and we couldn't take our eyes off of the night scenes. The problem is with the disastrous script, and the below-par acting that pulls the movie down. The climactic battle is an engaging one, and it all comes down to a flawed and corny, but enjoyable movie. It might be a film worth watching if you are looking to kill some time and get yourself some mindless entertainment. Late Phases, 2014. Ambrose McKinley, a blind, grizzled war vet, comes to live in a quiet retirement community. However, of late, the peaceful community has been disturbed by mysterious animal attacks. People here are not dying of old age, but from vicious attacks by dog-like beastly creatures. Ambrose has an encounter with the canine assailant himself, and he believes that it is a werewolf. The others seem to dismiss his opinion, but he uses all of his military training to prepare for the next full moon night, so that he can stop the murderous beast before it is too late. There is something about grumpy old guys in movies that makes it extremely entertaining. After all, it is not often that you find the protagonist to be an elderly fellow, especially when it comes to fighting werewolves. Nick D'Amici makes a very believable blind Vietnam veteran, and the supporting cast is also up to the task. The effects are quite solid, and the creature's design leaves nothing to complain about. If you add to that the original plot, the end results are bound to be great. People have compared it to Silver Bullet, but the similarities are a bit far-fetched. As for the story, one of the most enjoyable parts was the anticipation. As Ambrose investigated for the possible werewolf in the neighborhood, there were too many suspects. He meticulously prepares for the next full moon, and the suspense about the identity of the villain makes sure that you are glued to your seat. There are no random jump scares or shaky cam shots to force fear on you. Instead, the filmmakers use old-school techniques that enhance the experience. Most of the kills are off-screen, and this might piss off the gorehounds a bit. Late Phases could have done a lot better with a bigger budget. It makes the special effects somewhat B-grade, although, as we said, they are still pretty good. The werewolf transformation scenes are sublime, and the overall portrayal is one of the high points of the film. This movie might sound dumb on paper, but you would be pleasantly surprised by the end results. The Company of Wolves, 1985. Rosaline lives in a country house in England with her family. She keeps having some vivid nightmares of werewolves in the Middle Ages. In these dreams, her sister is dead, and she lives with her parents. She also spends a lot of time with her grandmother, who tells her all kinds of stories about werewolves and other paranormal creatures. She has a few warnings for Rosaline and asks her to never stray from her path in the woods, eat a windfall apple, or trust a man whose eyebrows meet. One day, as she heads off to visit her grandmother through the woods, she comes across the handsome man. However, she soon learns about his real identity. If you are familiar with the fairy tale, you already know that her journey will not be a smooth one. The director, Neil Jordan, deserves to be applauded for his efforts to modernize an iconic fairy tale in this movie. Imagine a complex Freudian approach to the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And that is exactly what this film is all about. It is hard to believe that a director could accomplish this in what is only his second film. The narrative has deeper implications, and it takes a spectacular approach to the beginning of puberty. The loss of innocence portrayed through some wild and erotic dreams of the protagonist speaks of the same. However, it is open to interpretation, and your take on the subject can vary from ours. We fell in love with the surreal, dreamlike atmosphere created in the movie. If the metaphorical nature of the narrative does not appeal to you, the spooky bits surely will. Sarah Patterson shines as the young protagonist, and the movie also has some great supporting actors. The climax will come across as a great surprise, and we won't spoil it for you. This werewolf flick is a piece of art, and you must witness this visually compelling fantasy. WOLFEN 1981. Dewey Wilson is a former NYPD captain who has been brought back to investigate a strange case. There is an unexplained string of violent murders in the city, and there are some high-profile people among the victims. The pressure to solve the case is extreme, but Dewey doesn't buy the easy explanation that terrorists are behind these attacks. In the course of the investigation, it is found that some of the victims have non-human hairs on them, which possibly belong to a wolf-like creature. Later, a group of native Indians reveal that the real identity of the killer is the Wolfen, or the wolf spirit, that simply cannot be fought. Is there an end to the series of murders, or will Dewey simply admit his defeat? You know a werewolf movie is good when it stands the test of time. This eerie, mythical werewolf horror thriller will seem just as good today as it did all those years ago. The outstanding cinematography is one of its kind, and you get to see a grim, terrifying side of New York. Wolfen lacks some of the basic events in a werewolf movie. There is no spectacular transformation or unbelievable visual effects to amaze you. Instead, there is a fascinating story that delivers suspense and tension in equal volume. The camera work is simply outstanding, and conceptually, the movie makes up for all of its flaws. However, the ending doesn't quite keep up with the expectations created by all the eerie build-up and savagery. Albert Finney delivers one of his finest performances, and the others are uniformly outstanding. One thing that strikes you while watching this movie is the accuracy of the film's depiction and the well-honed script. We watched this film quite a few times, and each time there was something new to discover. If you are into symbolism and mysticism, there is a lot to love about this movie. Brotherhood of the Wolf, 2001. We are transported to 18th century France, where something deadly is stalking the mountainous region of Gévaudan. These beastly attacks have taken their toll on the locals, and over 100 of them have been killed so far. Chevalier de Vonzac is sent to investigate the matter, along with his Native American friend, Manny. Nobody really knows the real nature of the attacker, and it could be anything from a bear to a wolf, or even a hyena. Our protagonist not only has to fight the beast, but also has to deal with bigotry, ignorance, and conspiracy in the region. He is helped by two unlikely women, an aristocrat and a prostitute, and eventually they solve the mystery of the murderous beast. The legend of the beast is quite a popular myth in France, and given that it is little known to the outside world, this movie is a fitting tribute to the same. The protagonist here represents the new rational world of enlightenment, and he is forced to confront the backward, superstitious France. His accomplice, Manny, brings another type of wisdom to the table. Overall, it is a curious mix of characters thrown into a gripping story. This is hard to classify into a particular genre. We were smitten by the candlelit interior cinematography, the lush, misty landscapes, and the exquisite costumes that make you go back in time. The audience will be pleasantly shocked by how good the beast looks, and it appears to be quite real. Another incredible drawing point for the film is to watch Mark Dacascos in some intense fight scenes. The director, Christoph Gans, is the same guy who made Crying Freeman, so you would expect nothing less than excellence when it comes to action sequences. If we must complain about something, it would have to be the overuse of slow motion that proves to be irritating at times. Otherwise, the movie carries you into a whole new world, and this unique adventure movie with a hint of history and werewolves makes for a perfect movie night.
Sarah! You said you wouldn't leave me, Sarah!
Nightwolf, 2010. Sarah Taylor has returned to her troubled family home after many years. A devastating storm is raging outside, and it causes a power outage at the place. However, they shortly find out that something sinister has come out of the rain and darkness. It is stalking them through the mansion, picking off members of the family, one by one. This wolf-like creature holds a secret that has the potential to wipe out her entire family in one night. Sarah has to fight off the beast till the morning light, but that is still 13 hours away. Will she be able to fight and save her family? Or will she succumb to the vicious creature?
Listen to me. I can get Luke out of here. I swear to God, I can get Luke out of here.
The story is a typical horror genre cat and mouse chase that focuses on the simple premise of a monstrous invader tracking down members of the family. It has been said that Nightwolf is a decent effort given the severe budgetary constraints. Because of the lack of funds, prosthetics and animatronics suffer big time, and the visual effects for the creature are somewhat wobbly. However, the narrative does have the tension required to hold you still for much of the movie. The makers also keep the creature a mystery and hardly show it apart from a brief silhouette, leaving the rest up to the imagination of the viewer. Many of the murders also take place off screen or are abruptly cut away. That might frustrate some of the hardcore horror fans. The cast did a good job with their roles, even though none delivered award-winning performances. The story could have done with a few more twists, apart from the solitary climactic shock that is also somewhat predictable. Another issue is the pacing of the movie, that wastes a bit too much time on the dramatics instead of focusing on the horror. You certainly cannot compare it to the classics of the werewolf genre, but Nightwolf is still watchable, owing to its sheer entertainment value. Legend of the Werewolf, 1975. In 19th century France, a young boy named Itoile was raised by wolves after they killed his parents. He grew up to be a feral wolf boy. A traveling circus thought that it would be a great opportunity to utilize his weird nature and adopts him. However, one night, he kills one of the troop and runs off to Paris. There, he gets himself a job in a rundown zoo, and on full moon nights, he transforms into a werewolf. He is also smitten by a girl who works at the local brothel, and naturally, he resents her client. When the full moon arrives, his violent side emerges, and he is quite unpleasant about these people. Professor Paul is charged with hunting him, and it is to be seen who emerges victorious in this contest. The obscure British werewolf movie from Tyburn Studios has found its audience after all these years. The director, Freddie Francis, did a decent job, and the movie has a nice feel to it. Everything else, from the atmosphere to the costumes, falls in place, and the sets are decked up just in the right order. The film does not falter technically. Even though the werewolf makeup is not up to the mark by modern standard, one of the intelligent camera techniques was the use of the red filter on the lens to give it a terrifying look. The makers skip on graphic gore because of their budgetary limits, and it is up to the actors to deliver the thrills. The likes of Peter Cushing do not disappoint, and Legend of the Werewolf provides an enjoyable 90 minutes. We also appreciated the dry and witty British humor in certain places, making the movie unexpectedly humorous. The ending is, however, quite tragic, and it leaves you with a heavy heart. The Fury of the Wolfman, 1972. Vladimir Daninsky was part of a Tibetan expedition, and he happens to be the lone survivor. He carries the curse of the pentagram, which was revealed to him by the monk who nursed him back to health. When he comes back home, he finds out that his wife has been unfaithful, and it unleashes the worst of his curse. He transforms into a killer werewolf, the Wolfman, and his fury is hard to contain. He disposes of his cheating wife, but soon discovers that he is being held captive by a crazy female scientist who excels in mind control experiments. He tries to escape, but in vain, and grasps that there are freaks from many such past experiments in the dungeons of the castle. Will the Wolfman end up like one of them, or will he be able to fight back? The late Spanish horror icon Paul Naschy stars in this movie, and he certainly makes his presence felt with some delightful acting. He is also the writer of the story, and according to him, the plot doesn't get the justice it deserved. There are some issues with the direction, and Naschy himself claimed that the director was drunk for most of the time on the sets. In the fully uncut version, there are some rather explicit scenes involving the Crazy Lady and Waldemir Dominski. The Crazy Lady simply wanted to destroy his marriage because she was obsessed with him, and there are some shocking twists in the tale. One of the biggest problems with this movie is the English dubbing, which hurts the ears. Another issue might be with the slowness of the narrative, which can be a bit boring at times. We aren't exactly crazy about the background score of the film either. If these problems were to be fixed, the fury of the Wolfman could have been much more than what the ratings of the movie suggest. It had the potential to be a surrealist masterpiece, and the lack of cohesive structure does ruin the chances. Project Metalbeast, 1995. Project Metalbeast is a secret project undertaken by the CIA to create an army of soldiers who would have werewolf-like abilities. For this, they head to the Hungarian castle, which is apparently inhabited by a werewolf, led by an amoral CIA agent Butler. They secure a sample of the werewolf's blood for the research. However, when the process turns out to be too slow, Butler grows impatient and injects himself with the blood. He turns into a deadly werewolf and goes on a killing spree inside the research facility itself. His boss shoots him with silver bullets and hides the issue by cryogenically freezing the bodies of Butler and his victims. Many years later, a doctor is obsessed with finding a way to create artificial skin. This could help those in need of a skin transplant, and he starts experimenting on the skin of Butler's corpse. The doctor soon shows signs of change, but it gets a lot worse when the research team finds the silver bullet inside Butler's body and removes it. Their experiment provided Butler with skin that is impenetrable, and there now seems to be no way to put down this monster. We have to give this full marks for innovative thinking. Who would have imagined the deadly situation where a werewolf has impenetrable metal-hard skin? The movie will surprise you with a lively script, and there are some great lines to make things even better. To add to this, you will enjoy some good performances by Barry Bostwick and the others. The creature's effects must be praised for its uniqueness, and the makers fought their way through the low budget to pull this off. But it must be said that the Metalbeast looks more like a hedgehog on crack than a werewolf. A spooky atmosphere is maintained for much of the movie, and it helps you sink into the dark world of werewolf lore. However, the film is not devoid of some genuine problems. The slow narrative gets a tad boring at times, and your only consolation will be that the story accumulates in a nice spin on the werewolf myth. If you are up for a nightmarish medical thriller meeting werewolf lore, this might just be the right movie for you. Strippers vs. Werewolves, 2012. A werewolf named Mickey is accidentally killed in a strip club. One of the strippers managed to kill him with a silver fountain pen. The ladies working there now have time till the next full moon before Mickey's vengeful wolf pack comes to hunt them down. His mates want revenge, and the colleagues of the ones who killed the werewolf are willing to put up a fight. Thus, it all boils down to strippers versus werewolves. And the outcome will surely be interesting. This is no Shakespearean classic, and you can expect one of the campiest werewolf flicks ever made. However, campy and corny can be fun at times, and this movie is all about that. The script is non-existent, and the acting is horrible. Whether or not the actors purposely made it look bad for the fun factor is for you to decide. The plot barely makes any sense, but then you get all the good stuff. from gore to nudity. There is also some catchy one-liners that will make you laugh. The makeup in the movie looks so bad that it looks like someone handed this project to the beginners in the field. The narrative never takes itself too seriously, and the silly nature of the film is probably purposely done. We loved the cool and catchy soundtrack, which was a perfect fit for the hilariously horrible movie. In a nutshell, watch this movie only if you can derive entertainment from outright cheesy and crappy film. A few of your brain cells are bound to die a slow death while you watch this. Wild Country, 2005. Kellyanne is a teenage single mother and she is forced to give up her baby for adoption by Father Stephen. After 6 weeks, she decides to be part of a cross-country hike with a group of her friends through the Scottish Highlands. Her ex-boyfriend Lee also joins the group with a plan to rekindle things between them. However, fate has something much worse in store for them. They find an abandoned baby amidst the ruins of an old castle and try to take the baby to safety. There is a vicious wolf-like beast that is after them, and one by one, the members of the group are picked off. They realize that they can either kill the deadly creature or be hunted down by it. This is a movie that has something for everyone. It has a few comical moments blended in with some scary ones, and the touch of social realism is a pleasant surprise. There is also a bit of romantic undertone to the story. One of the strong points of the movie has to be the acting, because a cast of relatively unknown actors deliver a very naturalistic portrayal of the character. The narrative is certainly a bit cheesy, but together with the brilliant camera work and acting skills, the movie soars above its potential. The special effects are found to be a bit lacking, but they do improve towards the end of the movie. The same goes for the lack of gore in the earlier parts of the film, because towards the end, things change. There are some nail-biting moments that will help you sit through the movie, and if you are a fan of European horror, you are certainly going to appreciate this one. We wish that the ending wasn't so rushed, because the movie doesn't deserve a runtime of only 72 minutes. They completely ruined the surprise by providing a climax that is totally expected. If you are willing to look past these flaws, Wild Country might be a unique taste of Scottish horror for you. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.